My adult son asked me to babysit his kids full-time, so he and his wife could both work. When I said I needed to be paid, he called me greedy. I retired 2 years ago after 31 years of teaching elementary school. I had a short list of things I'd been waiting for: a pottery class on Wednesdays, regular lunches with my sister Donna, a garden I finally had time to actually tend. 3 months ago, my son Mark asked me to give all of that up, 5 days a week, unpaid, so he and his wife could both keep working. When I told him I needed to be paid something, even modestly, he told me I was being greedy. I've thought about that word every day since. My name is Patricia. I'm 66 and I love my grandchildren, Henry, 4, and Lily, 2. More than almost anything. I want that said plainly before anything else, because this isn't a story about a grandmother who doesn't want to be involved. That was never the issue. I taught 4th grade for 31 years outside Richmond. 7 hours on my feet, 25 9-year-olds grading at night, going back every September, even the year my husband Robert was in chemo. I loved the work, but by the time I retired, the tiredness had settled into my joints, not just my schedule, and I'd earned some rest without needing to justify it to anyone. 2 years of mornings without an alarm. Pottery on Wednesdays. Real lunches with Donna. Those 2 years mattered more than Mark ever seemed to register, because when he asked for my help, I don't think he was thinking about what I'd be giving up. He was thinking about what he and Jess needed. Mark and Jess have been married 6 years, both working full-time, using a daycare center 15 minutes from their house since Henry was 18 months old. Then in late spring, the center closed. A lease issue, staffing shortages, 6 weeks to find something else. They called on a Sunday evening, both of them on the line. "We were hoping," Mark said carefully, "that maybe you could help out, just until we figure something else out." "Of course," I said, meaning it. "How many days?" 5, Jess said. 7:30 to 6 most days. I sat with that. 11 hours, 5 days, a toddler and a preschooler. That wasn't a favor, that was a job. I said so gently. Mark assured me it was temporary. I agreed to start the following week. The first month was harder than I expected, even with 31 years of classroom experience behind me, because teaching 9-year-olds and caring full-time for a 2-year-old share almost nothing beyond the word children. Henry was manageable, old enough to follow instructions, to play alone in short stretches. Lily needed constant physical attention in a way that wore on me by the end of most days, in a way I hadn't felt since my own children were small. And I am not 36 anymore. I dropped the pottery class after the 3rd week. Wednesdays had become a full childcare day, and there was no version of the schedule that let me leave for 2 hours. I mentioned it to Donna at one of our increasingly rare lunches. "You gave up pottery for this?" I didn't see another option. "How long is this supposed to last? Until they find something else? Are they actually looking?" I didn't have a good answer. I realized sitting there that I hadn't heard either of them mention another daycare option in weeks. I want to tell you exactly what I felt standing in that kitchen, because the specific shape of it matters. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was the disorientation of realizing a decision had been made entirely inside someone else's head, without me in the room for it. Since you're retired anyway and you love spending time with them, as though those two facts together added up to a complete plan that needed no further conversation, because the only 2 things that mattered, my availability and my love for my grandchildren, were already settled. "Mark," I said, setting the diaper bag down, "I think we need to actually sit down and talk about this. Not standing here at pickup. A real conversation with Jess too." He looked surprised, the way people look surprised when a settled matter turns out not to be settled. "Sure," he said. "Is everything okay?" "We'll talk Saturday," I said, and left it at that. I spent the days before Saturday thinking carefully about what I wanted to say. 31 years of writing precise report card comments teaches you not to leave things vague, when vague will only get misread. I didn't want to walk in apologetic when what I needed was to be clear. Mark and Jess came over without the kids. I made coffee. We sat at the same kitchen table where Mark had done his homework as a boy, which felt like an odd thing to be aware of while having this particular conversation with him as a grown man. "I want to start by saying I love watching Henry and Lily," I said. "That's not in question." "Okay," Mark said, carefully now, picking up on the tone. "But what we agreed to in the spring was a short-term bridge while you found something more permanent. It's been almost 3 months. And Tuesday you told me this might just be the long-term plan, without us ever actually deciding that together." "We've talked about it," Jess said, "between the 2 of us. We just thought, since it seemed to be working, it's not that it isn't working," I said. "It's that it's a full-time job. 11 hours a day, 5 days a week, with a toddler and a preschooler. I taught for 31 years, and I'll tell you honestly, this is harder on my body than most of those years were, because I'm 66 now, not 36. We're really grateful." "Mom," Mark said. "I believe that you're grateful," I said. "But gratitude and an actual plan are 2 different things. If this is going to keep going, we need to talk about what that looks like, including compensation." A pause. "Not long, but the kind that tells you something has landed differently than you expected. Compensation." Mark repeated. Yes, I said. Something close to what you'd pay a daycare or a nanny for the same care. Not the full amount. I understand this is still partly a family arrangement, but something. Right now I've given up my own time, my own life, entirely for free. And after 3 months, I think that deserves a real conversation instead of an assumption. It feels kind of transactional, Jess said, putting a price on it. Putting a price on 11 hours a day, 5 days a week, of actual physical labor with 2 small children isn't transactional, I said. It's accurate. You were paying the old daycare $2,000 a month for less than what I'm doing now. I'm not asking for $2,000. I'm asking for something. Mark was quiet for a moment. Then he said the thing I haven't stopped thinking about. I guess I just didn't expect you to be this greedy about it. I want to be honest about how that landed. There's a version of this story where I tell you I stayed perfectly calm the whole way through, and that wouldn't be entirely true. Something in me went very still and very hot at the same time. The particular feeling of being hurt by someone you raised, by someone whose homework happened at this exact table, using a word that implied I was asking for something unreasonable, when what I was actually asking for was not to work a full-time job for nothing. Greedy, I repeated. I didn't mean it like, I think you meant exactly what you said, I said, keeping my voice level though it took real effort. You think it's greedy for me to ask to be paid for 11 hours a day of childcare, 5 days a week that I've been doing for free for 3 months, while you and Jess both keep your full salaries? Mom, that's not— I gave up pottery, I said. I see Donna once a month instead of every week. I'm exhausted in a way I haven't been since I was actively teaching. And you're telling me I'm greedy for asking that this be treated like the job it actually is? Jess looked uncomfortable, glancing between us. Nobody meant to suggest you don't have a life, she said. This is a hard conversation and I don't think we're handling it well. I think it's a very clear conversation, I said. I'm asking to be compensated, or for us to go back to actually looking for other care, the way we originally agreed. I'm not willing to keep doing this for free indefinitely, and being called greedy for saying so doesn't change my answer. The conversation didn't end well. Mark left frustrated. Jess left somewhere between apologetic and defensive. I sat at the table for a long time afterward, coffee gone cold, feeling a kind of grief I hadn't expected over what was, on the surface, just a disagreement about scheduling and money. I called Donna that evening. He called you greedy? She said, in the tone that made clear she found the word as absurd as I did, for asking to be paid for a full-time job. That's what he said. Patricia, you taught for 31 years. You raised that man, and he's calling you greedy for not wanting to work another full-time job, unpaid, at 66. I know, I said. That's the part I keep getting stuck on. Not even the money, really. The word. What are you going to do? I sat with that for a while. I don't know yet, I said. But I'm not going back to Monday like nothing happened. I need a few days. I want to tell you about those 4 days first, because they mattered as much as the conversation that came after them. Monday morning, the day I'd normally have had Henry and Lily at my house by 7:30, I woke up to silence. No call, no text. I made coffee and sat in my reading chair, and for the first time in 3 months, I had absolutely nothing scheduled. I picked up the book I'd abandoned back in April when the daycare crisis started, and read for 2 hours straight, and I'll admit some part of me felt guilty about how much I enjoyed it. I called the community center about pottery on Tuesday. A spot had opened. I signed back up. I assume Mark and Jess scrambled to cover those days somehow. I never asked exactly how, and they didn't volunteer it, which told me something on its own. What those 4 days actually clarified for me wasn't anger. It was a distinction I needed to be able to hold clearly. I missed Henry and Lily. Genuinely. But I did not miss the arrangement, and those were 2 different things. Jess came by Saturday before Mark, about 20 minutes early. I wanted to talk to you alone first, she said, sitting at the table. I think I owe you an apology Mark doesn't fully understand he needs to give yet, and I wanted to say my part of it separately. Okay, I said. I let Mark do most of the actual asking because it felt easier coming from him since you're his mom, she said. And somewhere in that, I didn't take enough responsibility for how big the ask actually was. 11 hours a day, 5 days a week, for free. I know exactly what that costs because I paid it to a daycare for 3 years. I just didn't think about what it meant once it was you doing it instead of them. I appreciate you saying that, I said. And the greedy thing, she said, wincing. I didn't say it, but I didn't push back on it either. In the moment. I should have. It wasn't fair, and I think it came from him feeling cornered, not from anything actually true about you. Mark arrived a few minutes later. I could see from the set of his jaw that he'd been thinking about this as much as I had. Mom, he said, sitting down. I've had time to think about what I said. I owe you a real apology, Not just for the word, but for the whole way I went about this. I'm listening, I said. I think I got so focused on solving our problem that I stopped thinking about what I was actually asking you to give up. What we agreed to in spring and what it turned into over 3 months were two different things, and somewhere in there I just started assuming you'd keep doing it because you love them, instead of treating it like the decision it should have been. With real terms, we actually revisited. And the greedy comment, I said, because I wanted him to name it directly, not gesture around it. He was quiet a second. That was wrong, he said. I said it because I felt caught, and it was easier to make you the unreasonable one than to sit with the fact that I was asking my 66-year-old mother to work an 11-hour day, 5 days a week, for free, indefinitely, and calling it a favor. You weren't being greedy. You were asking for something fair, and I made you feel bad for asking. I'm sorry, Mom. I sat with that for a moment, feeling something loosen in my chest that had been tight since that Tuesday at pickup. Thank you for saying that, I said. Both of you. We spent the next hour actually working through what an arrangement could look like, the conversation I'd wanted back in spring, before everything quietly hardened into an assumption. I told them I was willing to help, genuinely, but not as a full replacement for daycare, 5 days a week. I proposed 2 days, Tuesdays and Thursdays, the days that fit around pottery and the rest of my life, with real compensation, an amount we worked out together that felt fair without matching what a full daycare center would charge, since this was still, in part, a family arrangement and not purely a business one. For the other 3 days, they agreed to actually look for other care. Seriously this time. Within 3 weeks, they found a spot at an in-home daycare with a cancellation, plus a part-time nanny named Carmen for the remaining gap, who Henry warmed up to almost immediately. The thing I keep coming back to, I told Donna over our restored weekly lunch, is that I don't think Mark set out to take advantage of me. I think he just didn't think it through, and once I was already doing it, it got easier not to. It's not that he doesn't value what I do. He'd just never been asked to put an actual value on it until I made him. And the greedy thing? I think that came from him feeling caught, not from anything true about me, I said. People do that, turn the other person into the unreasonable one instead of sitting with something they already half know isn't fair. I want to tell you what Tuesdays and Thursdays actually look like now, because the ending isn't that I walked away from my grandchildren over money. I didn't. I see Henry and Lily 2 full days a week, and because there's an actual agreed arrangement behind it now instead of an open-ended assumption, I look forward to those days in a way I'd stopped being able to during those exhausting 3 months. Library story time on Tuesdays, which Henry now asks for specifically. The garden on Thursdays, Lily eating more dirt than strawberries, Henry slowly understanding what a seed becomes if you're patient with it. I have my Wednesdays back for pottery, my other days back for Donna and myself, and somewhere in all of that, I think I actually became a better grandmother than I was during those exhausting months, because I had enough left in me, on the days I did see them, to actually be present instead of just surviving until pickup. Mark and I had a quieter conversation a few weeks later, just the two of us. I keep coming back to the fact that I called my own mother greedy for not wanting to work for free, he said. I don't think I'll forget that I said it. I know, I said. I'm glad you said it again, plainly, instead of just letting it stay implied. I think about that spring and summer sometimes, the diaper bag in my hands, the stillness in my chest at that word. I don't think I handled every part of it perfectly. There were moments where my voice got sharper than I meant it to, where 31 years of patience with other people's children didn't fully transfer to patience with my own son in that exact moment. But I'm glad I didn't simply absorb it. I didn't decide that being called greedy meant I should quietly go back to what I'd been doing, because raising it again felt harder than continuing. I said what I needed, plainly, more than once, until it actually got heard instead of just acknowledged. Henry asked me last week, completely out of nowhere while we were planting tomatoes, whether I was going to be his grandma forever. I told him yes, always, no matter what. He seemed satisfied with that, and went back to patting dirt around a seedling with far more force than it needed. That's the truth underneath all of this. I was always going to be his grandma, and Lily's, regardless of how the childcare logistics worked out. What I needed was for everyone involved, myself included, to understand that loving them and being available for free, indefinitely to solve someone else's problem, were two different things that didn't have to stay tangled together the way they'd quietly become. They aren't tangled anymore. And I think we're all better for it.